Your audiovisual is based on theory from the book. Mention 5 theoretical aspects that you used in your audiovisual and explain them.
Here are the 5 theories that we used in our audiovisual presentation. We used intercultural communication competence, that refers to the degree of which you effectively adapt your verbal and non-verbal messages to the appropriate cultural context. However, the cultural shock whisperer does not use this competence effectively, as he defies Wang's non-verbal expectancies. We also use violation of non-verbal expectancies. The culture shock whisperer went a bit too far and violated Wang's non-verbal expectancies. He went too far by asking indiscreet and personal questions about Wang's feelings about his adaptation to Dutch culture. Stages of culture shock. U-curve hypothesis by Kim Zapf. You have 4 stages of culture shock. Tourist phase, which is the period where Wang discovers the city and takes great pleasure in it. Then comes culture shock, where Wang is feeling confused, tired, frustrated, depressed, and lonely from being the new guy in town. After the culture shock whisperer gives advice to Wang, he finds new friends and begins the adjustment phase, as he makes friends and starts to adapt to the host culture. And after a while, he becomes adapted. Strategies for managing culture shock. The culture shock whisperer makes examples of the strategies needed in order to overcome culture shock. Modes of acculturation, integration. Wang integrates himself in the Dutch culture by making friends and discovering Chinatown. On the modes of acculturation graph, he would stand more on the integration quadrant.
Cross. What is the goal of our audiovisual? What is our target group? What is the message we want to get across? Why is our message relevant to our target group?
Well, the goal of our audiovisual assessment was informed how foreign students can imagine culture shock in the Netherlands. Our target group is the first-year international students. We want to inform foreign students how to manage culture shock, and that even if it's hard to live in a foreign country, there are ways to minimize the influence of culture shock.
We believe we have successfully achieved our goal because we tried to bring the 4 stages of culture shock to life in our video by showing Wang experiencing the tourist phase wherein he is having a positive reaction to his new environment. Then we showed his state of confusion and frustrating due to culture shock, followed by Wang adjusting to the host culture and in turn Wang adapting. This was all made possible by the help provided by the culture shock whisperer to Wang. The culture shock whisperer reveals in the video that he has also dealt with culture shock before and has managed to successfully overcome it and was more than willing to help Wang. He provided Wang with information and tips on how he can overcome it, such as establishing relationships with host nationals, immersing oneself fully into the new culture, and remembering that overcoming culture shock will take a while and one should not give up so easily. These are some of the tips we are hoping our target audience will remember after viewing our video and hopefully apply these to their lives.
So Eva, what would you do differently in terms of content if you had to do the assignment again?
We would include interviews with more first-year international students that have already passed through culture shock in order to show to our target audience how they manage with culture shock and give different examples for each stage. We could focus on their own experiences and how they dealt with culture shock. If we included more people from different nationalities, our target group could feel more connected and affiliated with people who are experiencing culture shock. If we were about to do the same assignment, we would definitely include more examples in the 4 stages of culture shock because they're especially important for the audience.
Stephanie, can you state your own critical question regarding the content of the audiovisual presentation and answer it?
The question we came up with is, do you think our video will be useful to prevent culture shock for students that are going to live in a foreign country? Our video will be useful because we provide the audience with tips and helpful information on how to overcome culture shock. Culture shock is hard to be prevented due to the fact that one gets over the tourist phase very easily and can quickly start dealing with frustration of being in a new culture. However, through our video, we showed our main character dealing with the 4 stages, and with the help of the culture shock whisperer, the main character managed to overcome it. We hope that the information we provided in our video, that the audience will be able to take it in and apply it if they ever have to overcome culture shock once they move to a foreign country.
I have learned that not everyone is able to cope with moving and changing that easily. As I am a third culture kid, I have moved several times now and I am able to adapt to a new environment very quickly. Moreover, I believe that you learn basic intercultural communication skills from an early age the best. And this is why I have never really experienced such culture shock. I also learned that everyone can have difficulties with culture shock, and it's new to me as I've never experienced it before.
I have learned from this audiovisual that culture shock have four stages, and usually people will do what in these four stages. People is moving all time, and most of them will facing the culture shock. And the culture shock is not just between the two countries. In the audiovisual, we have shown the Chinese international students come to the Netherlands and how they facing the culture shock. But the culture shock is not between the countries. It's happened everywhere. Maybe from one city to another, different peoples, different place, and different civilization. So that's a culture shock happening. The most important thing is not what you're changing yourself. The most important is how to deal with the problem with your friends. Facing together, then you will figure out what's the best way to deal with this culture shock.
Upon moving to the Netherlands, I believe I've gone through the phases of culture shock without actually realizing I had culture shock, because I quickly skipped from the first stage to the next stage, and then before I knew it, I just adapted. I have learned from this assignment that culture shock can happen to anyone when coming in contact with a different culture, because the values, the beliefs, and the customs from that person's culture are different from the one they are moving to. A lot of people stay stuck in the phase of culture shock, which can lead to severe depression, and I've learned through this assignment that one can overcome this and cope with culture shock. As long as you remember that it takes some time, but with some determination, it is possible.
The reason why I like the topic culture shock is because I passed through each stage of it myself when I came in the Netherlands. It was for the first time when I went to live and study in a totally different country. I think that our audiovisual presentation perfectly describes each phase of culture shock and gives tips and advices about how to deal with it. We made a story about an international Chinese student who is going through culture shock in the Netherlands, and I think this would be appealing and interesting to see for the other international students. The storyline of the Chinese student and the whole audiovisual assignment can be related with my own biography, because last year I experienced the same thing. I already learned my lesson about how to deal with culture shock, and I think I've managed to overcome it, and I am adapted already to the new culture. It was interesting for me to show to the others the different stages of culture shock that everyone passed through. It is important for each person to know how to deal with them in order to get integrated into the new society. I think that our movie gives examples good enough that everyone can understand and use as tips in the future.